honorable sisters, brothers, and friends, if I make a mistake, even a little detail mistake, I immediately try to correct that. And I just had, I thought, a real good presentation of having quality videos. And by and for intellectuals. Well, I said in the development of man and their culture and their intellect, I said he gathered in ethnic clans. And I meant to add from those ethnic clans, they developed ethics, culture, and even laws, governing laws that then made their civilization maybe as great as it became. And another little detail was in recounting the story of Galileo trying to catch the velocity of light. And I'll mention it again, and that is light. And I say it in English, so I use 186,000 miles per second. That's tremendous speed. So by the time you say 1,001, light can circle this earth at least 7 times. That's pretty tough to catch, especially in Galileo's time, because the timepiece he had was just a 1-second water clock. But he tried. And he would go further and further mountaintops. Well, now he's old, and it's raining, it's cold, and he says, well, I'll give one more chance to try to catch this velocity of light. Because Galileo was able to catch the velocity of sound. It was Galileo who obtained the correct velocity of sound. He wanted to do the same for light. He resolved anything he ever tried except catching the velocity of light. So they said, well, Galileo, what's your final analysis about this light? And he thought a moment and he said, well, if it's not instantaneous, it's awful blankety blank, gosh darn fast. Well, then I said, so the velocity of light light's instantaneously velocity. Well, it's light's instantaneous velocity. A minor little mispronunciation, but in mathematical physics I present absolutely has to be perfect. I believe in mathematics being the language of physics, which reminds me of my favorite story, and it's an important story. This man, like me, I think was after World War II, and like me, he had maybe he had an injury, and he found it difficult to try to remember the math he had in high school, which he said he didn't really care to be a mathematician or that much about math. But he decided he wanted to be a physicist. He got interested in the subject. He said, oh, I want to become a physicist. Well, the college he went to said, well, your math is not up to our standards. And he said, well, when I answered a question, I use, English words. He says, I use the words to describe it. Isn't it described right? And the professor says, well, yes, but you should use math. He said, well, if the answer is correct by my description, why do I have to use a mathematical system for the words to describe it? He said, well, that's the way it's done. He said, well, I can't do it that way. I didn't have that much math, and math wasn't that interesting to me. It would take me 2 years to study the math you want me to know And by that time, I'll be kind of too old to say, I'll start being a physicist in college. So the school, the college, correctly, in my opinion, said, all right, he can continue at this college towards obtaining a BS, Bachelor of Science, in physics. Well, that went on until he obtained his degree in physics. Now he has a physics degree. And he said, well, they tell me in order to really be in physics work, that you should have at least a master's degree. Well, I'll get a master's degree. Well, he starts off now at the same college. And they said, well, gee whizzers, we gave you a Bachelor of Science, but he said, what's the difference whether I'm an undergraduate or a graduate? I have perfected how to describe whatever needs to be solved, if it's correct. So they says, okay, you can continue, you can get a master's degree. So he gets a master's degree, an MS in physics. That's really an achievement. Now he says, I want to be a PhD in physics. The university says, no. I don't think we can do that. He says, well, let's start and see if I can do it. So he takes his postgraduate work. He has his graduate, a professor, does his research, puts his dissertation, does everything. It's all written. So the university now says, well, how can we say he has obtained a PhD? He says, well, you go before the oral board. Now, the oral board wasn't just of that university, and the oral board says, absolutely not. We disallow that he's a PhD. He has to do what all of us do, and that's use the language of physics as mathematics. So they said, no, you're not a PhD. Maybe he got an intelligent attorney, and the attorney sued the board that decides in the oral portion of determining if you obtained your PhD. When he got to the court, the attorney said, I'll make it real brief. This man has completed all the requirements needed to explain and resolve anything in physics that he was told to resolve. Now, is he a physicist or isn't he? It's my opinion that he is a physicist. Now, the opposition attorney gets up there with experts and they go through that mathematical physics like the expertise they have. And, the judge is looking at them and he's saying, so the judge says, well, I'm going to take this under consideration. I'll give you my decision tomorrow. And the opposition says, what decision? It's like a prima facie case. He says, I'm going to review what's been presented, and I'll give you my decision tomorrow. And he paced his office, and he thought about it. He says, that PhD board and those experts, when they talk, I don't really understand what they're talking about. But when that man who says he's a physicist explains physics to me, I can understand it. Now, to me, I think he's a physicist because he can explain what a physicist is and what he's doing and prove it. But the other ones, I have to take their word for it. I think he's a physicist. So he ruled. The man was a PhD in physics. Not one equation in his work to obtain his PhD. That's a true fact. Now those, especially if they're prejudiced or recoil defensively because of my speaking voice, the tone and the words. I grew up in New York, and I didn't think I had an accent. No, we all spoke the same. But when I taped my science and played it back, I says, that's me? I sound like a tough New Yorker on the subway. And then I was conferring with one of Enrico Fermi's top colleagues, came here from Italy in reference to advanced concepts in theoretical mathematical physics, getting to the essence of mass and a electromagnetic field, mass and a gravitational field. So you have an electromagnetic coil, and you have an electric field, magnetic field, and you have mass and a gravitational field. It's my opinion, we have a gravitational universe. It's the fundamental force. And he would close his eyes and listen to me, and then he says, he said, when you present your capital X prime is capital X minus VT over the square root of 1 minus V squared over capital C squared, capital C equal to or greater than little c, Einstein's supposedly ultimate universal velocity, that you've broken, theoretically at least, broken the light barrier, and that you use your rho prime, M prime, V prime, R does today, but they don't announce it, equal his rho MV R, and you set R to unity, and then as your M prime decreases towards an infinitesimal particle, that if my rho prime equals his rho, my V prime has to be greater than his V, which he said is the ultimate universal velocity. Well, then, theoretically, I have to agree that you've theoretically broken the light barrier, BLV. He says, I close my eyes and I just, that's really great. He says, but you scare me. I says, scare you? How, why? He says, well, I first came to this country. He's on the subway. I listened to those toughs of New York, and they would scare me if I could safely get back home. He said, so, well, I have to say, I apologize. I played baseball. I was the leadoff batter, what they call a holler guy, the spark plug, and I sparked my team to the championship. And this is my speaking voice, and I am from there. And I say myself, gee, what a darn lousy New York accent. But English was not my first language, and you, of course, would understand that. And it's not my preferred language. So I will try to have spelling was my toughest subject, because in English you don't spell the words like they're pronounced. Well, in other languages they end in a vowel, and how you pronounce the word is how you spell it. And they would say, you speak broken English. Well, the subject, you say the subject. I was taught you say the subject, and then you give the predicate, the verb, what the action of what the subject is doing. So the man runs. We say, look at that running man up there on against the background of the blue sky. Where? You look up there, there's a man running up on a hill, Look at that running. He's running and against the blue sky. Actually, it's man is running and sky is blue. You say the subject, and then you give the action or describe the subject. So when they say sky blue, they say, oh, you speak broken English. No, you speak broken grammar. And because you speak broken grammar, you say I speak broken English. Now, what I'm going to say is that Galileo said there's every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Because of what I've achieved, and because they forced me to be anonymous, I deserve honors and reasonable compensation for my lightification of electromagnetic radiation. I'll say it again. Lightification of electromagnetic radiation. Number 1 in the world. My laser futuristic multi-purpose coherent beam. Absolute true fact. You put this on a boisterous analyzer, which I helped develop, and it'll prove I'm saying the truth. Or a lie detector, polygraph, lie detector test, absolutely telling the truth. Any editor, anytime, but you must publish the result. I'll pay for the lie detector test, but you must publish the results, because that's absolutely true. So, those who know I'm saying the truth, I say thank you. And I'm going to go 24/7. To every action against me to keep me anonymous, there's a reaction. And that's the way it is. Thank you.